The following content may contain visuals that are disturbing, graphic, or sensitive in nature. Viewer discretion is advised. This material is intended for mature audiences and may not be suitable for all viewers. Please exercise caution while watching, and if you find such content distressing, we recommend discontinuing viewing. This disclaimer is provided to ensure awareness and to prioritize viewer well-being.
Hello and welcome. You're watching our rolling coverage of the Israel-Hamas war, which has now entered 46th day. While Israel has expanded its operations into southern Gaza, a truce might be on the cards with a deal to release hostages. Let's take a look at top developments so far. Israel-Hamas war is now closer to truce, according to various media reports. Military operations at Indonesia hospital is in complete compliance with international law. Ofer Falk, foreign policy advisor to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, has said 100 patients evacuated from the Indonesian hospital so far. According to Gaza health officials, 28 newborns have been transferred to Egypt from Gaza's Al-Shifa hospital. WHO official Michael Ryan has warned of a possible breakout of epidemic in Gaza. Yemen's Houthis have released a video of Red Sea hijacking of a cargo ship. Over 13,000 Palestinians have been killed in the war so far. Well, the Israel-Hamas war is now nearing a truce. The Hamas has said that it is nearing a truce with Israel, even as Gaza continues to be under bombardment from the Israeli Defense Forces. The group has delivered its response to Qatari mediators. While the statement provided no further details, a Hamas official told Al Jazeera TV that negotiations revolved around how long the truce will last. Arrangements for delivery of aid into Gaza and the exchange of Israeli hostages, mostly women and children held by Hamas, for Palestinian prisoners in Israel. Modalities of the agreement will be announced by Qatar, which is mediating the negotiations. And even as the ongoing Israeli-Palestinian conflict continues, President Joe Biden has now signaled progress in negotiations for the release of approximately 240 hostages. The discussion, mediated by Qatar, began after a deadly attack by Hamas, marking the tragic day in Israel's history. Now, while the proposed deal revolves exchanging 50 hostages for a 3-day ceasefire, facilitating increased emergency aid to reach Gaza civilians, the White House and Israeli officials initially, denied the existence of a final agreement. However, they have now acknowledged progress in the talks.
Truly unprecedented.
So today, I think Secretary Austin is in Kyiv to meet with Ukraine's leaders. I know this is of great interest to all of you. I just want to let you know we're still working this hour by hour. I do not have an update for you on the hostage deal that we're trying to negotiate. But as you heard the Deputy National Security Advisor say yesterday, we believe we're closer than we've ever been. So we're hopeful. But there's still work to be done, and nothing is done until it's all done. So we're going to keep working on this. We're also working to increase the flow of life-saving humanitarian assistance, food, water, medicine. We're calling for respecting the international law in terms of minimizing the loss of innocent lives. And of course, we're continuing to advocate for humanitarian pauses so that people can get out of harm's way and that aid and assistance can get in. Over the last couple of days, the 18th and the 19th of November, almost 100 trucks carrying humanitarian aid were able to enter Gaza. That brings the total to over 1,260. And then following Israel's announcement that it's allowing fuel now into Gaza to support non-governmental organizations at our strong request, we are now tracking that 6 trucks have crossed down into Gaza with approximately 18,000 gallons of fuel. That will help support food distribution and it will help generators for the hospital so that they can keep working. The total number of U.S. citizens that we've been able to move out of Gaza through that Rafah crossing is now up to 800. We're continuing to work that every day as well.
Meanwhile, the Israeli army has released a video on Monday of what they described as a weaponry lab under a mosque in Gaza City, Zaytun's neighborhood. Army spokesperson Daniel Hagari said that the Israeli forces discovered a factory that produced weapons and unmanned aerial vehicles and a tunnel shaft in the search of the Gazan mosque.
The 188th Brigade located inside a mosque, a factory that produced weapons and UAVs. I want you to understand, a mosque in the area of Zaytun has been used as a factory for the production of weapons. Soldiers entered the mosque and conducted a search, working in cooperation with soldiers from the Yahalom unit, and after the forces checked that there were no traps, they discovered a tunnel shaft. In addition to this tunnel shaft, the soldiers went further below and discovered a workshop for making rockets.
And relatives of some 240 people held by Hamas in Gaza urged far right-wing Israeli lawmakers on Monday not to pursue proposed capital punishment for captured Palestinian militants, saying that even talks of doing so might endanger hostages. Far-right National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir has called for the death penalty, which is dormant in Israel's law books. Some of the relatives of the people held captive by Hamas in Gaza worry the publicity around capital punishment debate could invite reprisals, even as hopes of a deal to free some of them is growing. The hostages have already been threatened by execution from Hamas and are at risk of being hurt or killed in the military offensive launched by Israel in response to the 7th of October attack.
Look at us, but not as an outsider. Look at us as if she's your sister, as if he's your child, your grandchild. Would you risk anything that could now harm his life? When he's back, prosecute them. Raise this discussion again. But he's not here because of this. He may never return.
And the family members of Israeli hostages abducted by Hamas said that they were very disappointed after meeting with the members of Israel's war cabinet. Relatives of over 240 hostages have been advocating for the Israeli government to get their loved ones back as soon as possible. Now, thousands of family members recently finished a 5-day march from Tel Aviv to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's house in Jerusalem, where he eventually promised that they could meet with members of Israel's war cabinet this week. After a war cabinet meeting with the ministers and handful of family members on Monday evening said that the families hoped Israeli government would prioritize the return of the hostages first and foremost.
With one single question, to know if all of the war cabinet supports the same stand that Gantz and Eisenkot took a couple of days ago when they met with us, when they said absolutely clear, without hesitation, that bringing out the hostages is the top priority as far as they're concerned. And now when we've met with the entire cabinet, what we've heard is that taking down Hamas and bringing the hostages are as important, are equally important.
And leaders from the BRICS nation are slated to convene an emergency video conference on 21st of November, tackling the pressing Middle East situation with a specific focus on the Gaza Strip. Russian President Vladimir Putin is also expected to join the discussion as South Africa takes charge of the rotating BRICS presidency. The statement reveals that leaders from the original BRICS quartet, Brazil, Russia, India and China, will gather under South Africa's presidency for the pivotal virtual meeting. Additionally, leaders from the newly included BRICS nations, Saudi Arabia, Argentina, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran and the United Arab Emirates have also received invitations. Following an opening address by President Cyril Ramaphosa, representatives from BRICS and the invited states will present their statements, shedding light on the ongoing humanitarian crises in Gaza. Notably, President Xi Jinping, Chinese president, is also expected to attend. He has accepted the invitation from President Cyril Ramaphosa to partake in the extraordinary virtual summit on the Palestinian-Israel issue. President Xi is expected to deliver crucial remarks from Beijing. Stay tuned for further updates on this developing story. Arab and Muslim ministers have also jointly called for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. Their delegation, currently in Beijing, initiated a tour aimed at advocating for the end of hostilities and facilitating humanitarian aid into the distressed Palestinian enclave. China is playing, remember, host to this crucial delegation comprising foreign ministers from Palestinian Authority, Indonesia, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. The primary objective is to find a resolution to halt Israel's offensive in the Gaza Strip. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi emphasized the urgent need for global intervention to quell the conflict, while Saudi Foreign Minister Faisal bin Farhan Al Saud seeks increased cooperation from China to expedite the resolution on the crisis. The diplomatic mission plans to engage with official representatives from each of the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council. Additionally, the delegation is also exerting pressure on the West, urging a rejection of Israel's justification for its action against Palestine as self-defense. We will bring you more updates on this evolving story as well. Remember, the extraordinary Joint Islamic Arab Summit in Riyadh this month has also urged the International Criminal Court to investigate, and I quote, war crimes and crimes against humanity that Israel is committing in the Palestinian territories. Member states of the United Nations General Assembly called for a ceasefire and an increase in aid to Gaza on Monday. Israel has ordered the evacuation of the north of Gaza, but thousands of civilians remain. Food, fuel, medicines, and water have been running out across the enclave under Israel's 6-week-old siege. In the south, where hundreds and thousands of Gazans who fled the north of the enclave are sheltering, there have been reports of Israeli strikes. The United Nations says that 2/3 of Gaza's 2.3 million people have been made homeless so far.
The humanitarian situation in Gaza is catastrophic, alarming really. Essential services have nearly collapsed, with unimaginable consequences for more than 2 million civilians. To this day, humanitarian access continues to be unsafe, severely limited and undependable. The aid that enters Gaza is but a fraction of what is required. An immediate and massive scale-up of aid is needed.
Where is the respect for international humanitarian law? How much more death and destruction can one cope with? How many more attacks on schools, hospitals, humanitarian workers, and so on must we witness? The level of suffering in Gaza is unbearable and inhumane. We welcome the UN Security Council resolution adopted last Wednesday. It was long overdue, and a humanitarian ceasefire is now a crucial next step.
The humanitarian situation in Gaza is catastrophic and worsening daily. An immediate humanitarian ceasefire is essential, and we repeat our calls for this, along with an urgent and significant scaling up of humanitarian access and supplies, including food, fuel, water, and medical supplies.
That for the sake of the UN and humanity, meeting and commitments are not enough. Resolutions and statements are not enough. It needs to be implemented on the ground. We need concrete action now. We need a humanitarian ceasefire now. We need unimpeded delivery of humanitarian assistance now.
And during the informal discussions at the UNGA on humanitarian situation in Gaza, India's permanent representative to the UN, Ruchira Kamboj, stated, and I quote, India welcomes international efforts for de-escalation, facilitating urgent humanitarian aid to Palestine, and that our leaders unequivocally oppose terrorism.
India welcomes all efforts by the international community that strive towards a de-escalation of the conflict and enables the delivery of urgent humanitarian assistance to the people of Palestine. The message from our leaders has been clear and consistent. We are firmly opposed to terrorism in all its forms and manifestations, clearly against violence, and are on the side of adherence to international humanitarian law and ensuring that further escalation is prevented, humanitarian aid delivery continues, all hostages are released unconditionally, and all parties work towards an early restoration of peace and stability. Towards this, we also welcome efforts for humanitarian pauses. We are also firm, Mr. President, in our commitment to provide humanitarian aid to the people of Palestine and have already delivered 70 tons of disaster relief materials, including 17 tons of medicines and medical supplies in 2 tranches, and our humanitarian support will continue. Similarly, India continues to play an active role as a member of the Advisory Commission of the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine refugees in the Near East. Mr. President, let me conclude by underlining India's consistent position of achieving a just, peaceful and lasting solution to the Israel-Palestine issue. India has always advocated the resumption of direct negotiations towards establishing a sovereign, independent and viable state of Palestine.
And Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu defended military action in Gaza. He spoke at Israeli marched onto office in Jerusalem, even as Israeli marchers have continued in Jerusalem seeking government action to release hostages held by Hamas terrorists and pro-Palestinian protests worldwide demanding a humanitarian ceasefire to save Gazans who are currently trapped in the enclave.
Israel abides by the laws of war. That's how our army works, the most moral army in the world. Humanitarian aid is also vital to maintain international support. Without humanitarian aid, even our best friends will find it difficult to support us over time. And it will be very difficult for us to continue the war until the end.
Intense firing continued to be reported around northern Gaza's Indonesia hospital on Monday. The Israeli tanks surrounded the hospital after artillery fire claimed lives of at least 12 Palestinians in the complex. According to reports, a shell struck the second floor of the hospital, killing at least 12 people. Hospital's director, Dr. Marwan Al-Sultan, told the BBC that the post-operative care department was hit and troops were only about 20 meters away. The Israeli forces said that the target was the terrorist who had opened fire at them from within the hospital. The World Health Organization chief claims that he was appalled. WHO says that it is appalled by the attack on Indonesian hospital in Gaza, reportedly resulting in 12 deaths, including patients, and tens of injuries, including critical and life-threatening ones. Health workers and civilians should never have to be exposed to such horror, and especially while inside a hospital, wrote Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus on X, formerly Twitter. Meanwhile, Ofer Falk, foreign policy advisor to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, said that the Israel's firing into Indonesian hospital in northern Gaza was in complete compliance with the international law. There are around 700 people, including medical staff and injured people, presently in the hospital. And a field hospital sent by Jordan enters the Gaza Strip, the first since the war between Israel and the territory's ruler Hamas erupted on 7th of October. The Jordanian field hospital has now entered the Gaza Strip with 40 trucks loaded with equipments, along with 180 personnel consisting of doctors, nurses and administrators. The containers arrived in Gaza through the Rafah border, crossing with Egypt. A UAE delegation is currently preparing to establish another medical facility. Displaced Palestinians in Khan Yunis were busy securing their tents and cooking on outdoor wooden stoves. Palestinians residing in the Jabalia refugee camp shared how the last 2 days have been, how tough they have been. The harsh weather with wind and rain caused tents to collapse, leaving many people soaked in the rain. The Israeli military also shared a video claiming to depict strikes on the building in Lebanon associated with the Hezbollah terrorist group. The Israeli army stated on their official Telegram account that they in fact conducted a series of attacks using fighter jets, military tanks, and a helicopter targeting infrastructure believed to be operated by the Iran-backed militant group. And moving on, in a recent development, US President Joe Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping have agreed to schedule another meeting confirmed by White House. The leaders convened on the outskirts of San Francisco, where they reached a consensus to re-establish military-to-military communication. According to White House spokesperson John Kirby, while they affirmed plans for a subsequent meeting, a specific date has not been determined yet. Kirby emphasized the significance of restarting military communications, stating, and I quote, "That's what's really important now, is that the military come and military comms begin to start, and even down to the theater command level," unquote.
So today, I think Secretary Austin is in Kyiv to meet with Ukraine's leaders. I know this is of great interest to all of you. I just want to let you know we're still working this hour by hour. I do not have an update for you on the hostage deal that we're trying to negotiate. But as you heard the Deputy National Security Advisor say yesterday, we believe we're closer than we've ever been. So we're hopeful. But there's still work to be done, and nothing is done until it's all done. So we're going to keep working on this. We're also working to increase the flow of life-saving humanitarian assistance, food, water, medicine. We're calling for respecting the international law in terms of minimizing the loss of innocent lives. And of course, we're continuing to advocate for humanitarian pauses so that people can get out of harm's way and that aid and assistance can get in. Over the last couple of days, the 18th and the 19th of November, almost 100 trucks carrying humanitarian aid were able to enter Gaza. That brings the total to over 1,260. And then following Israel's announcement that it's allowing fuel now into Gaza to support non-governmental organizations at our strong request, we are now tracking that 6 trucks have crossed down into Gaza with approximately 18,000 gallons of fuel. That will help support food distribution and it will help generators for the hospital so that they can keep working. The total number of U.S. citizens that we've been able to move out of Gaza through that Rafah crossing is now up to 800. We're continuing to work that every day as well.
And with that, it's a wrap on the show. We'll be back after a very short break.